The new Ghostbusters film hasn't even been released yet, and it's already turning into a disaster. Audiences are panning the trailers, heads are rolling at Sony, and the director, Paul Feig, is blaming it all on misogyny. The problem with this film should have been obvious from the beginning. There's a reason audiences have reacted so negatively even before the rumors of the lame duck script were released. It's not just that they got the music wrong, turning 80s synth into modern orchestral. It's not just that the outfits look dumpy, and the jokes are lame. There's a far more fundamental problem which poisoned this film from the get-go, which no amount of creativity could have compensated for. The problem with Ghostbusters 2016 is that the main cast is all female. Now, am I saying that an all-female cast in a comedy-adventure movie aimed at general audiences is an inevitable death knell? Am I confirming Feig's accusations of misogyny, that audiences are just angry because they can't deal with strong female characters? No, not at all. In fact, if you took the 4 women playing the Ghostbusters and put them into another film, it could have been incredibly successful. In fact, the 2011 comedy Bridesmaids had much the same cast and the same director, and it was received extremely well. If instead of Ghostbusters, the 4 of them had starred in a sequel to, say, Jumanji. Just imagine it, the same 4 actresses fighting off giant insects and killer plants, while the Great White Hunter comes after them, hating them for no reason at all. That could have worked, as a comedy, as an adventure, and it wouldn't have traipsed all over the goodwill from the Robin Williams film. So is the problem with this film that it is a transparent feminist reboot, taking a beloved IP, sex-swapping the lead roles, and pretending that this somehow makes women empowered? Not exactly. While it's certainly a blatant slap in the face to audiences, that's nothing more than the icing atop a concept that was fatally flawed from the beginning. The reason Ghostbusters doesn't work with a female cast is because at the core, it is a male story. Now I'd like to step back for a moment and consider the term strong female character. My colleague Zarius had a video where he discussed this topic at length, and he uses the term strong female character to mean good female character, complex female character. It's a great video and I definitely recommend that you check it out, but I'd like to go in a different direction and consider the specific wording that is being used. Strong female character, as opposed to powerful female character. Strength, physical strength, is one of the defining aspects of masculinity. When you contrast the sexes, there's no contest. The average man is stronger than 95% of women, and even female bodybuilders don't get much stronger than your part-time gym rat. This is why hitting women is such a universal taboo. We expect men to use their physical strength to protect women, not abuse them. Someone who's strong is someone who's powerful. But strength isn't the only form of power. In Game of Thrones, neither Tyrion nor Varys are strong physically. Tyrion because of his dwarfism, Varys because he was gelded. And yet both of them are powerful and admirable despite physical weakness. This is why I find the phrase strong female characters so interesting. It sets women up to fail, competing in an arena where men are the superior sex. Or it requires that they be empowered by the director, who winds up giving superhuman abilities to 120-pound Scarlett Johansson. This results in cognitive dissonance for the audience. In Avengers, Black Widow is tough enough to beat up hardened Russian mobsters at the beginning of the movie, but later on, when we see her fight Hawkeye, every healthy, well-adjusted person in the audience is subconsciously outraged that this big man is beating a tiny woman. Strength isn't the only difference between the sexes, though it's one of the most obvious. Men and women differ in so many ways, in complementary ways. Each sex is specialized to work well with the other. Men are good at some things, women are good at different things, and trying to judge either sex by the standards of their complement isn't just foolish, it's dehumanizing. So let's return to Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters from 1984. What's this movie really about? When you strip away all of the makeup, the setting, the ghosts, the gags, and the big-name actors, what is the kernel of narrative that you find? It's a movie about four friends putting together a small business and the difficulties they have to deal with, both from clients and from regulators. This is a masculine story at its core. Not because women aren't capable of inventing a proton pack, not because men have better instincts for what sort of businesses will succeed. The reason it's a masculine story is because of the psychological inheritance we received from our ancestors. Men evolved to go out and prove themselves to women, to take big risks, to bite off more than they can chew. Women evolved to find security in the home environment so that they could raise their children successfully. Women who took risks wound up failing the test of evolution. So did the men who played it safe. Because of this, our ancestors were the risk-taking men who would do something like gamble on ghostbusting being a successful business model. And our ancestors were the cautious women who would rather achieve a stable income on Etsy, even if that means that they'll never hit it big. Furthermore, we tend to have more sympathy for women than we do for men. We're more likely to give them help when they encounter difficulty. There are good evolutionary reasons for this, reasons that are so obvious I won't even bother mentioning them. But when it comes to Ghostbusters, this innate empathy undermines the conflict. In the original film, Walter Peck, the EPA regulator, was an antagonist we loved to hate. But he wasn't a villain. At the end of the day, he was just another man doing his job, even if he went about it foolishly, and his anger at the Ghostbusters was comedic.
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
But replace Dan Aykroyd with Melissa McCarthy, and we're right back to Hawkeye acting like a wife-beater. What was once a funny pissing match between a couple of guys is now an abusive misogynist who doesn't want women to succeed. For most of us, the differences between the sexes are so obvious that they wind up being difficult for us to even notice. Are men and women equal? Of course they are! What sort of savage would say otherwise? Should you treat a gentleman in the same manner that you'd treat a lady? Why, of course not. What poppycock. What an absurd suggestion. This is all so obvious to us on a subconscious level that when something like Ghostbusters 2016 shows up on our radar, we just know it's wrong, even if we can't quite orchestrate why. So if that's the case, how did Sony fail to realize that this was a disaster from the beginning? It's time we looked at the director, Paul Feig. In a 2015 interview with Variety, he discussed how his world had been female-centric from a young age, how he never learned about masculinity from a father who was always working. In another interview with Hollywood Reporter, he made a point of saying that his favorite color was purple. It is clear that Feig is a man who's deeply confused about the sexes. Not because he's a dandy necessarily. Oscar Wilde was a dandy, and he had a very deep understanding of the sexes. But because, from the earliest of ages, he was encouraged to identify with the female, to seek female primacy. He was a boy raised to be a woman, and now that he is a man, he takes his malformed, stunted understanding of masculinity and projects it onto the other sex. He wants to see women as saviors, as soldiers, as successful in business. He wants a woman who will continue to overmother him, protecting and providing for him. His latent masculine instincts are screaming that he ought to be protecting and providing for women, but because he never grew up, he projects those roles on to women.
Well, a mother, a real mother, is the most wonderful person in the world.
In their review of the Star Wars prequels, Red Letter Media pointed out that the biggest failures of those movies was that they didn't tell a human story. Audiences couldn't relate to the characters on the screen, and so once the dazzle of the special effects faded, there was little left to care about. Man is the storytelling animal. All of our narratives are built off of rules and tropes embedded deep within our subconscious. The reason that rescue the princess is a theme you find throughout all cultures is because women have always been attracted to men who are strong enough to defend them. When you flip the sexes, putting a woman in a position to rescue a man, the romance at the end of the story evaporates. Instead of fighting to rescue a lover, she is fighting to rescue her younger brother. Everybody understands this, even if they can't put it into words. And when you present them with a narrative that's broken from the get-go, they can all sense that something's wrong even if they can't put their finger on it. Both Paul Feig and Amy Pascal, the chairman of Sony Pictures, are deeply sexually confused, and as such are obsessed with forcing female bodies into character roles designed for men. They want to see a strong princess go and rescue a weak man and then fall in love with him, to everybody else's disgust. It wasn't a bad script that killed this movie. It wasn't problems during production, and it certainly wasn't fear or hatred of women. What doomed this movie from day one was the deep-set mental illness of both Feig and Pascal. Rather than crafting a good film, they tried to force their sickness into the world, twisting reality with contradictions and demanding that reality accommodate them. They went against the logic of the human soul, and because of that, Ghostbusters was doomed from the start.
There's a bigger picture at hand here.